20. He will score!
To the end zone, down the field, and it is deflected and gone! Touchdown! A.J. Green!
Over goes back to throw. Men are coming late. Looks right down the middle. There's Eddie Brown. He has it at the 35 to the 30. He may go 10-5. Touchdown!
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up.
Yeah.
It is good!
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards. And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20, touchdown! And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Chad Johnson's got it. Touchdown, Cincinnati.
Look at Chase go. Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found. Chase for the touchdown. Wow, Chase is on the case.
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about that?
Chatterbox Bengals back here with you for another episode. Turning the page to week 2, here to look forward to the Bengals and the Chiefs at 4:25 on Sunday. Here with co-host Craig Sandlin. I'm Jacob Tissett, and we're ready to go. Craig, I hope this week goes better than last week. Last week we were all optimistic leading up to the game, and then it didn't go as planned. I think the optimism might have taken a hit, but I still believe in our guys.
Yeah, I believe in the Bengals. I mean, I'm not going to go into this week as optimistic as I was going into the Patriots game, obviously. But nonetheless, look, I think that this team has over and over again shown an ability to get up for big games and perform when it matters most. I'm expecting them to come out and perform the same way this week. A lot of bulletin board material already that we'll talk about later on today. And if at the end of the day, they're going up against a really good Kansas City Chiefs team, we'll break down that matchup and some of the key players to watch for the Chiefs.
Wearing my AFC Champions hoodie, trying to get some good vibes going for the weekend matchup. Obviously, that one went the Bengals' way, and we were able to go to a Super Bowl, so hopefully beating the Chiefs in Kansas City this time can lead to the same thing down the line. A lot of issues were brought up after the Bengals, lackluster, to say the least, showing against the Patriots in Week 1. Whether it was Burrow's wrist, which we're going to hear him talk about here in a second, the play of the outside receivers or lack thereof for a few, and just the explosion of the defense. We saw a lot of things be bigger problems than a lot of fans expected going into Week 1, and I think the one that could have posed the biggest issues for the Bengals long-term would be any kind of injury towards Joe Burrow, whether it's new or lingering with the wrist. We saw what has happened with this team when he's out, and we saw how good they are when he's in. So rightfully concerned for a lot of Bengals fans when he was seen messing with his wrist on Sunday. And he was asked about that in the press conference earlier this week, and this is what he had to say.
I'm doing that all the time. When you come back from injury, you're always trying to keep the joint loose. That's part of ligament injuries. If you don't move it, you're going to lose it. So I'm always moving around, keeping it loose, keeping my mobility the way that it's supposed to be. So, it's going to continue to happen. I do it at home, I do it here, I do it all the time.
Does it all the time. Those movements that we saw the broadcast focusing in on seem to be something that he's just getting used to. I think it's easy for a lot of people to forget that this guy had reconstructive wrist surgery. There's plates and screws and all these other new things in his throwing hand that he has to get used to. And when you're playing a game of football for the first time at full speed since that injury, there's going to be some nuance that comes with those changes, and no fault of the broadcasts for focusing in on that. He's a star player. He's the Bengals' key to success. He's one of the biggest names in the entire league. That's information people are definitely interested in, but I think they definitely played it up a little bit because of how the Bengals were playing, how poorly Joe had looked throughout most of that game, and how bad the offense was. I think people were looking for an excuse to pin it on since he has been hurt in the offseason, which has contributed to the slow start the last few years. People were grasping at straws for the same thing this year, and I just quite frankly don't think that's the case. I said it on Sunday, and Burrow has continued to emphasize it over the last few days. The wrist is not a problem. He's healthy. He's just concerned. And I think that's something that you see with a lot of guys that get hurt, whether it's Kirk Cousins in Atlanta in week 1, not pushing off his back foot because he tore that Achilles and he's protecting it, or, Aaron Rodgers only throwing balls to one side of the field, again, because of a lower body injury that's affected his mindset. I think it's the same thing with Burrow. Major injuries are going to affect the mindset no matter how good of a player you are. You just hope you can get over that hill soon, hopefully by Sunday, and go back to the Joe we all know and love. But I think he will, and all the quotes from him this week, it would have been very easy for him to say, I'm done talking about the wrist. No questions about the wrist. We're moving on to the Chiefs, or anything like that. Standard player, coach speak, whatever you want to call it. But he's addressing the questions head on, and he's saying, hey, it's not an issue. So it's certainly reassuring to hear that from 9.
Yeah, look, Joe Burrow will be the first one to tell you that he didn't perform to his best ability in week 1. That's no secret. The question is the performance a result of an injury, or is it some other factor? For me, when I watched it, he just didn't feel comfortable in the pocket. He was getting happy feet. He was moving around more. There's a viral video going around this week about him picking up a Gatorade bottle that just was silly. And quite frankly, when I watched it, I was like, yeah, I pick up my water bottle that way sometimes too. Like, it's just, if it's down there by your side, you're going to pick it up and you're going to flip it around, and it is what it is. Like, none of that really bothered me. We talked about it in the post-game show and again on Tuesday. For me, I'm more so focused on Joe Burrow finding comfort in the pocket this week. And, we're going to talk about the Chiefs a little bit more, but the Chiefs play man-to-man just as much as any other defense in the league. And Joe Burrow has performed extremely well against man-to-man defense over time. And so this is an opportunity for him to come out. There's been a lot of naysayers this week on national television, I got to say. And Joe Burrow has a chance to rescue that naysaying.
And no better opportunity than this week against the Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs played the Ravens in week 1 and took care of business, even if it was by a quarter of a yard of Isaiah Likely's cleat. A half shoe size, the outcome of that game would have went differently, but the Chiefs took care of business against a very, very good team. And the Bengals did not against a bad team. So it's no surprise to me that the spread is above what it has been for the last few Bengals-Chiefs games. And honestly, after watching the product the Bengals put on the field on Sunday, I'm surprised it's as low as it is. It opened at 7. It's down to 5.5. A lot of movement, a lot of changes on where the money's coming in on. I don't think people know what to think of the Bengals. I think a lot of people wanted to believe that we were going to start strong this year, have nothing holding us back as we hit week 1 with a healthy offseason for everyone that mattered. Even though Jamar Chase held out, there were no injuries in camp up until the last week or so where T. Higgins gets hurt with a hamstring. Everyone thought the Bengals were just going to hit the ground running, a nice change of pace from the last few years, but that's not true. And I think this game would have been really close to a 50-50, if it's not still. But with the Bengals dropping a game to the Patriots in week 1, I just don't know how anyone outside of Cincinnati could justify picking them going into this week just because of how bad they looked in basically every facet.
Well, look, again, there were multiple areas that didn't look very good on Sunday, and there were also some bright spots, but more so than not, some lackluster performances to say the least. And again, this offense is looking like it's going to be without T. Higgins this week. A lot of people thinking that maybe the Bengals have been overrated coming into it. However, Jamar Chase had something to say about being overrated. Let's take a look at that clip from earlier this week as well.
Yeah, 100%. Everybody knows that, bro. It's not no if, you know what I'm saying? We are the team to beat in the AFC, and we know it, and we got to act like it, and we got to play like it too.
That's pretty point blank and clear from Chase there. No wavering in the locker room based on the expectations for this team just because of a slip up in week 1. I think it certainly helps that they've been able to overcome this before. Not that you want to continue to start slow, but seeing in person, in reality, overcoming a slow start and getting to the playoffs, getting to the AFC Championship, getting to the Super Bowl, gives these guys the mindset that, hey, this season isn't over. This season might be over for a lot of other people if they lose early to a team they're supposed to beat, but not for us. Not with Jamar at receiver, not with Joe at quarterback. We have faith in this team, and it's nice to see that faith is still happening in the locker room as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We touched on it Tuesday. This Bengals team has come out slow year in and year out under Zach Taylor for whatever reason. This is an opportunity for them to kind of make a bounce back here. And whether it's this week against a really difficult Chiefs team or it's down the road against the Commanders next week or otherwise, this Bengals team is going to bounce back. I fully believe in that. We've seen time and time again Joe Burrow get more comfortable as the season goes on. You look at last week, from weeks 5 through week 9 before the injury, Joe Burrow was like the number 2 quarterback in the league in most categories that mattered. So, again, I'm looking for progress this week. The season isn't over if they lose, but it's certainly a good omen if they are able to get the victory in Kansas City.
I've said it time and time again. If you would have told me the Bengals were 1-1 through 2 weeks, I would have been pretty excited. I would have had a lot of questions about how those games were lost or what transpired, but 1-1 through 2 weeks against the reigning Super Bowl champions and the team that's supposed to be picking at the top of the draft, I could justify that. I could be pretty happy with that outcome. Now, obviously, it's not going to come in the way that we expected at the beginning of the season, obviously, with the one loss already in place. But if we can turn around and beat the Chiefs, we're still in a very, very good spot with all of the goals that we have. Obviously, no division teams on the roster or on the schedule yet, so it's not the same shot in the chest as it was to lose to the Browns and the Steelers in week 1 that really set you back in a divisional race. Obviously, still a conference team, which is going to hurt the ability to have the number 1 overall seed if it gets down to tiebreakers, but everything's still in front of it for the Bengals, and they seem to recognize that. I hope that they turn it around in more ways than just intensity this weekend. It seems like they recognize that going into week 1, they weren't as ready to go as they needed to be. The intensity wasn't where it needed to be. We saw a lackluster start, 3 straight 3-and-outs for exactly that reason. And I think they've stepped that up, but it goes a lot deeper than just mindset and intensity for the Bengals going into Sunday. They need to change a lot schematically, in my opinion, in order to turn around and win this game against a really good team.
Yeah, look, Steve Spagnuolo, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, if not the best.
Yeah.
He's going to mix up looks. He's going to disguise his looks. Joe Burrow is going to have a lot of responsibility pre-snap to try and recognize those defenses, as Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best at kind of disguising defenses before the snap. So there's a lot of potential here for some disaster, but there's also a lot of potential for that next step moving forward. Steve Spagnuolo is going to give Joe Burrow all he can handle without a doubt. But there's matchups that are winnable, and we'll get into some of those matchups down as we move forward. But there are definitely winnable matchups, and some guys who, again, depending on what happens with the injury report and stuff like that, could have a big impact on this game if they do play or don't play, for that matter. And we'll get into that as well in a little bit.
And what do the good teams do best? They take away your number 1 target. I fully expect Jamar Chase to have a great game and the offense to run through him. I mean, he played poorly for his standards on Sunday, and he had 6 catches for 60 yards, which is a pretty good game for most receivers in the league. So I think the Chiefs are going to focus on him. Obviously, a lot of unproven guys elsewhere on this receiving core, other weapons on the offense that haven't really done it at a high level consistently. The Chiefs are a Super Bowl contender for a reason, a Super Bowl champion for a reason. It's because they make those other guys beat you. And we're just going to need those other guys to step up. They didn't this last weekend against the Patriots, and hopefully they do this week. Here's Zach Taylor talking about Jermaine Burton, who is one of those key other guys for me and a lot of other Bengals fans when talking about who else could step in to that wide receiver 2 production level with T. Higgins out with an injury.
No, I think Jermaine has made progress and done things he needs to do to continue to grow like any rookie. I mean, you look at Chuck and Andre last year, and it took them a while to find their role, and it's not an easy system. We try to put people in opportunities where they can continue to grow and have confidence, but outside of picking a receiver with the 5th overall pick and the 33rd overall pick, it's not easy to walk in here and immediately be able to play to your full potential. And so I think he's going through a process just like all of our other rookies we've drafted have gone through, and are continuing to grow and gain confidence and earn our confidence, and those opportunities will continue to come.
And I think that's all it comes down to. The Bengals have never thrust any rookie straight into the fire other than, like he said, the 5th overall pick, the 33rd overall pick. And Jermaine Burton's not that. We've talked all summer that he has the talent to be that. We think he's a first-round talent, all that good stuff, a top 4 wide receiver in the draft. That's all splendid. But there's a reason the Bengals drafted him at 81. And if all that talent's there, I think there's a little bit of a buildup where you might start thinking, well, maybe the other issues are a little bit bigger than we think. If the talent truly is first-round level, and look, Zach's saying right there that he certainly just needs time in the playbook. This is not a simple scheme, and I know a lot of people might push back on that and say Zach Taylor's play calling is as vanilla as it gets in the NFL, but it doesn't matter what NFL scheme you're running. It's a step up from college. It's a lot more to deal with. It's a lot more to memorize, and obviously Jermaine Burton is struggling with that aspect of it so far. He was throwing with Joe Burrow after practice today. There were some pictures of them two on the practice field working together, and you have to think that maybe that's a nod to that they'll see more time on the field together this weekend, trying to get some chemistry down. But I'm not pressing the panic button on Jermaine Burton only running one route on Sunday, but I'd certainly like to see him more. I think the product that was on the field from the other wide receivers outside of Jamar Chase on Sunday just simply wasn't good enough. There wasn't enough separation and not enough creation on their own. They seemed like every time a receiver not named Jamar Chase, and even for most of that game, Jamar Chase included, had to be schemed to do everything that happened. I would like to see a wide receiver or any weapon on the offense take that ball into their own hands and make something happen when there's nothing available. And I didn't see any of that from really anyone on the offense when it comes to Yoshivas, Charlie Jones, Trent Irwin, any of those guys. And we saw, obviously, against third-string practice squad, backups, and burger flippers, who knows after the 53-man roster cuts who Jermaine caught those bombs over. But he looked good doing it. He looked good doing it in the preseason, and we haven't seen a whole lot from the other receivers. So that from Zach lets me know that he's at least hearing the fans, hearing the concern, wondering where Jermaine Burton is. Obviously, the media bringing it up because it's a question a lot of people have, and I think it's just rushing a young kid who still has a lot to learn.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of speculation this week about Jermaine Burton having a bigger role in this offense this week, and that's certainly a possibility. The Chiefs lost L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason to free agency to the Tennessee Titans. You know, they still have Trent McDuffie, but I certainly expect Trent McDuffie to be really matched up with Jamar Chase in most scenarios. And so that might open up opportunities for other wide receivers to have a little bit of a bigger game. But at the end of the day, what was missing in the week 1 game against the Patriots for these Bengals was that deep threat. The Patriots weren't respecting the run because there was no real threat of that after only 9 carries for the entire year for the entire week for Zach Moss. So they were not respecting play action. They were not respecting anything related to a potential run. And so for me, yes, Jermaine Burton may ultimately have a bigger role, but the only way that he has success in that role is if the Bengals have success in the trenches and running the ball to be able to open up over top to get Jermaine Burton open, because it doesn't seem as if his route tree is going to be super complicated here early on. It'll be a lot of 9 routes, just going down the sideline, trying to take the top off the defense. All it takes is one route to get, open and to go for a deep bomb to change the way Steve Spagnuolo calls this game. But at the end of the day, the only way that happens in my mind is if Zach Moss gets going early on and opens it up over the top for Jermaine Burton.
If you let Steve Spagnuolo get comfortable and call the defense that he wants to call, this game will not go well. That's the Chiefs' recipe for success for however long he's been there now. They have Chris Jones that's going to wreck the game up front. Trent McDuffie, like you said, has turned into one of the best slot corners, heck, any corner in the entire league. He's absolutely incredible. Nick Bolton had a rough week 1, but we know what he is as an inside linebacker. They have pieces all over that defense and studs at all 3 levels, which gives a great mind like Spagnuolo the ability to be so free and let those guys do what they do on their own. And I think the main reason why a lot of people are talking about Burton and talking about the other receivers, focusing on Zach Moss and what he's going to be able to do this weekend, is because of what we saw today and yesterday in practice, and that is T. Higgins still not practicing. DNPs both Wednesday and Thursday. No practice, not even limited for T. Higgins either of those days, trending heavily towards not playing in week 2. This will be the second straight game missed for him. And right before we got on tonight, I think it's important to talk about T. Higgins had an interview with ESPN, I believe it was Ben Baby, where he talked about his injury. And he said that he was, I'm paraphrasing now, I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said that he was offended, taken aback that Bengals fans thought he was faking the injury. Thought he was doing it for a contract reason. He said, I want to be out there. I want to be playing for this team. The only way I can get another contract, a big-time contract that I want, is to be playing, is to be putting up production on film, putting up big numbers. And I want to be out there, and I'm not faking this injury. And I think it's nice that T is willing to clear that up, not that he should. Hand up, I might have floated that after the post game in a time of anger and sadness. But look, I don't think T's out here faking an injury. I think T is banged up, and I think he's protecting himself, because the worst thing that can happen to him in this whole holdout, franchise tag, extension next year, who knows what his future holds. The worst thing that could happen is he rushes back and tries to put up great numbers to get that big contract, and he hurts himself long term. That hurts the Bengals, and that hurts T. Right now, would the Bengals like to start 1-0? Yeah. Would they have maybe started 1-0? Are we talking about 2-0 Tuesday, potentially? If they would have had T. Higgins? Maybe. We'll never know that. But the Bengals are playing football right now for November, December, January, and February. And sitting T. Higgins out in the first 2 weekends of September is going to be able to preserve him for those bigger games down the stretch.
Look, T. Higgins said, I just don't understand why fans think I'm faking an injury when for me to get an extension for a contract, that deadline is over. I just don't understand why they think I'm faking an injury. It doesn't make sense to me. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't make sense for him to fake an injury at that point. He signed his franchise tag. He's making $23 million this year. And if he has any hope of making $20+ million again next year, whether it be with the Bengals or anywhere else, the only way for that to happen is to play. The knock on T. Higgins right now, potentially as a new signer for him, is that he's been somewhat injury prone. And so if he's going to end up sitting out an extended period of time, that's only going to play into this conversation. Now, if you're T. Higgins, I'm not going to tell him 100%, because the last thing I need to happen, like you said, is for me to go back out there and retweak the hamstring and then have to miss 2 or 3 or 4 more weeks afterwards anyway. I'd much rather get 100% than come back. It's still, and I realize it's only 17 games, but it's still a long season, and there's still a lot of opportunity for this Bengals team to have success, regardless of what happens here in week 1, 2, and even into week 3 and 4. So look, if I'm T. Higgins, if the injury is true, which I have no reason to doubt that it isn't, of course, I'm not rushing myself back. I think the thing that draws a little bit of ire from the fans in the way that the timeline worked out is that he comes out, he says it's the best he's felt heading into a season in his career.
Yeah.
And then the next day he's got this hamstring injury. Now, the timing of it obviously is not ideal, but that doesn't mean that it's fake. I mean, if it was fake, then why would he even play it up and how good he feels to begin with? It just doesn't make sense. So look, I'm on board that this isn't a fake injury, but to your point, it is going to be a question until he returns of what's going on with T. Higgins. And that's not going to go away regardless of whether fans think he's faking it or they believe that it's a true injury. They're going to want T. Higgins back, because as the national media is portraying now, Joe Burrow is not any good unless he's got 2 elite wide receivers with him. And so the pressure is going to continue to be on Joe Burrow until he can show that he can utilize the backup receivers that he has at his disposal, Andre Yoshivas, Trent Irwin, Jermaine Burton even, and Mike Gesicki, to lead this team to a valuable win and show what they can do on offense. That question's going to linger for T. Higgins.
That's exactly right. And you just quite simply need someone to step up. You have multiple wide receivers for a reason, and when one guy goes out, it should not affect your offense as much as it does. I'm not saying any of these guys are going to beat T. Higgins, but they should be close. Isn't that the point of having a wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 4, and a wide receiver 5? Is when you have an injury, your whole offense doesn't get derailed. I understand that not having Jamar, not knowing he was going to play until Sunday morning, and not having your number 2 is impossible to game plan with. But going into week 2, I expect to see some big changes, because why are you rostering these guys if you don't have faith in them sliding in and playing more snaps? That's honestly where I stand right now with that wide receiver room. And T. Higgins, obviously the one everyone's focused on, but not the only Bengal on the injury report this week. Joe Burrow, right wrist, he's been on the injury report the entire summer, and as I've mentioned before, and as I'll mention every time I talk about Joe Burrow on the injury report, the new NFL CBA, if you get any treatment on that body part, you have to be on the injury report. So if Joe Burrow's getting an ice pack on his wrist after practice, he's on the injury report. A full participant Wednesday and Thursday for Burrow. No worries there. The big one for me, B.J. Hill, hurt in the game. And if you were watching live, you saw Craig and I's reaction to that one. Certainly not pretty, especially with the concerns with the Bengals' defensive line depth. He was limited on Wednesday, but a full participant today. So great signs for BJ Hill, both with his health and whether or not he's going to play in week 2. Certainly looks like it. For Tanner Hudson, a guy that maybe the Bengals would be better off if he didn't play, didn't practice on Wednesday, was limited on Thursday, so trending back towards the lineup. Chris Jenkins still on the injured report after surgery on his thumb, did not practice either of the last 2 days, but the hope is that he'll be able to avoid IR and just remain on that injury report and hopefully get back with the Bengals in the next week or so. Marius Mims, limited in practice the last 2 days, continues to be limited. We talked to Jay Morrison on Off the Bench a couple days ago, and he said that the team is concerned with Trent Brown's struggles. He did not look good in week 1, and Amarius Mims was supposed to slide into that role if he was healthy. But Amarius Mims obviously not healthy yet, still just taking light sled work off to the side of practice, not a full go or anything like that. But Jay did say that he would expect Amarius Mims to at least battle for that right tackle spot as soon as he is healthy. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on as we look for in-season additions that can make the Bengals better. Amarius Mims is a big one for me. Zach Moss listed on the injury report as a full go in practice, but on the injury report for the first time. And as Craig said, I think he's so crucial to what this Bengals team's going to want to do on Sunday. I certainly did not like seeing him pop up, but again, as I said, a full participant, so should be okay. And I don't really know what the team level of faith is in Chase Brown. Only 3 carries on Sunday in a game where you were struggling to have any explosives, and he's the guy that's supposed to give you those, and you don't use him. So I think the Bengals are really going to rely on Zach Moss in the backfield as that bell cow lead back a little bit more than we expected early in the season. So hopefully he'll be a full go on Sunday, and it certainly looks like he will be. Logan Wilson did not practice on Wednesday, was limited on Thursday, but is expected to play on Sunday. So big news for the Bengals on a lot of fronts with this injury report. A little more crowded than I'd like it to be this early in the season, but I guess I'll take it since most of the guys are trending towards playing.
Yeah, it seems like most of the guys are trending towards playing, obviously, without T. Higgins.
Yeah.
Look, the Kansas City Chiefs gave up 185 rushing yards in week 1 to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I get that 122 of those went to Lamar Jackson, but at the end of the day, 185 yards is 185 yards. And so Zach Moss is going to have to play a big part of this offense come Sunday against this, somewhat banged up Kansas City Chiefs. Derek Nottie, again, their starting D tackle, was a full participant today, but he's on the injured list. So we'll see if he can play. You mentioned Nick Bolton had a lackluster performance in week 1 against Baltimore. So that front 7 potentially opens itself up for some damage if Zach Moss can get going. I'd love to see something explosive out of him this week. I know we talked about it earlier this week. A lot of falling forward, a lot of pushing the pile forward out of Zach Moss in week 1. Would be really nice to see him break one open and get a long run for the Bengals and kind of open up that running game for them, which then, of course, leads to opening up the passing game. But from an injury perspective, the best thing, like you said, BJ Hill, look, we're going to talk, I'm sure, about Isaiah Pacheco here shortly, and BJ Hill has to be a part of that, and they have to tackle and they have to wrap up. And having BJ Hill available this week will be certainly a step towards making sure that they're containing this Chiefs running game. Isaiah Pacheco ran for 45 yards and a touchdown in week 1 against Baltimore. So a hard runner and certainly someone that the Bengals, I'm sure, are going to be keying in on, and having BJ Hill as part of full participant is certainly going to be beneficial for that.
Yeah, hard runner might be the understatement of the century. He pounds his feet into the ground harder than I think anyone I've ever seen, and that's a major concern when going up against this Bengals defense after seeing how Ramondre Stevenson treated them in week 1. 14 missed tackles is I believe it was 3-season career high for Lou Anarumo's defense, is what he said. 3-season career high. Yeah. That's insanity against the team that's supposed to be towards the bottom of the league in terms of offensive talent, and you can't tackle. Quite simply cannot tackle. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, no way around it. The Bengals couldn't tackle on Sunday. And if you can't tackle against Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Kelce, and even though they don't have the big-name receivers on the outside like the Tyreek Hills they had one day, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, those guys will make you pay. And those guys have getaway speed. And if they make one guy miss, the Bengals could be in trouble. And the secondary really struggled bringing guys down. And the Chiefs have guys that thrive in open space. So I'm really concerned with not just Pacheco on the tackling aspect, but a lot of those outside weapons as well. But certainly after Sunday, when can't help but think about Pacheco in this game on Sunday, and what he's been able to do to carve out a consistent role in that offense is incredibly impressive. A 7th-round pick out of Rutgers being dropped in and contributing to a Super Bowl team right away. That's the stuff real great championship dynasty level teams do, is you hit on 6th, 7th-round picks, and fingers crossed, hopefully the Bengals did so this year. Matt Lee, their 7th-round pick, made the roster as the backup center, and hopefully is going to be the heir apparent to Ted Karras. The ability to keep this window open for as long as possible is by infusing young late-round rookie talent in with the guys that we've already extended and forming one complete unit that can work together and win a championship. And the Chiefs have done an unbelievable job of doing that, and the face of that is Isaiah Pacheco.
Well, Dan Orlovsky of ESPN talked this week about the Bengals lacking physicality, and he meant it both offensively and defensively. Obviously, we saw it this week with the lack of ability to tackle, but the Kansas City Chiefs, quite frankly, are a great example of having that explosive, dynamic playmakers on the outside with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy while still maintaining a physicality. Obviously, we talk about Isaiah Pacheco, we talk about Travis Kelce, but let's not forget Noah Gray, the second-string tight end, certainly has shown an ability to catch the ball. Justin Watson is 215 pounds as a number 3 wide receiver. Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, all guys that can break tackles and be physical with you. And that's really what they do. And then obviously they supplement that with an extremely physical offensive line as well. Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey is one of the best centers in all of NFL. Juwan Taylor, the second-year man at right tackle, obviously has had a little bit of struggles in terms of some pre-snap penalties, but he's not having a whole lot of issues as it pertains to actually being physical and controlling the line of scrimmage. So the Chiefs are going to be physical with you. Yes, they're fast. Yes, they have playmakers, but they're also extremely physical and quite frankly fit a little bit into the mold of that AFC North of old that we talk about with the Bengals and a long time ago when it was all about smash mouth football. The Kansas City Chiefs aren't afraid to play smash mouth football. I wouldn't be surprised to see that out of them this week as well.
They've been trying to strike gold with these young receivers, trying to replace Tyreek Hill, find someone to grab that role, and they just haven't found it yet. Maybe that guy is going to be Xavier Worthy. I'm not entirely sure. Cam Taylor-Britt certainly didn't seem to think so, and we'll get to that in a minute. But on Sunday, the Chiefs had a very interesting mix of wide receivers. I guess it wasn't Sunday. On Thursday, the kickoff game against the Ravens, the Chiefs had a very interesting mix of wide receivers when it came to snap count. Juju Smith-Schuster played a career-low 22.2% of the offensive snaps. This is after they bring him in, and he's supposed to be the veteran presence in that room. He's supposed to be the go-to receiver in that room. At least a lot of people thought. He was incredibly productive on that team as the pseudo number 1 when they went to the Super Bowl a few years ago, and then obviously he departed, went elsewhere, didn't really perform, and then the reunion everyone thought was, these other younger receivers aren't working out. There's questions about Rashee Rice future, about whether or not he'll be able to be on the field. They're signing Juju Smith-Schuster to just slide right into that wide receiver 1 role, and they won't miss a beat. Career low number of snaps. I think they found some really talented young guys that they're willing to put all their eggs in that basket and just run them out there and get them touches, which is something the Bengals aren't necessarily willing to do. I'm willing to bet that Juju Smith-Schuster's probably had a little bit better of a training camp than Xavier Worthy. I mean, I've seen countless amounts of Xavier Worthy drops and whatever else being blown up by defensive linemen in training camp. But you still give him a chance because the upside is insane. You took him early in the draft, obviously much earlier than Jermaine Burton, who I'm alluding to, but you give him a chance because the upside's so high and you want to give the young guys confidence earlier in their career, and that's what the Chiefs continue to do. We saw Sky Moore, who is a little bit different of a situation. He played only 18% of the snaps. That's the ability to give up on a guy you put a lot of faith in and used a lot of draft capital on. That was a first-round pick. And they're just shoving him aside. They say, we got other guys we're going to use that give us a better chance to win. That's another sign of a great team, a great coach team, a great culture. You have to be willing to just put whoever gives you the best ability to win on the field. And the Chiefs seem to have found a system, a collection of these receivers that gave them a pretty good look against a very good Baltimore defense on Thursday. And I'm worried about the matchups on the outside with all these guys. The DBs picked it up in the second half. Obviously, we've beaten the tackling debate like a dead horse, but they weren't great at coverage in the first half either. Obviously, they were asked to stick with their man for a long time. Not a lot of consistent pressure by the defensive line, and Brissett did a great job about maneuvering around and finding the open guy late in the play after it breaks down. But at the end of the day, the DBs just did not look good enough across the board for me to feel confident going up against Travis Kelce, who, yes, I count as a wide receiver. Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice. All of these weapons we're going to have to match up with. If you don't think Travis Kelce is going to be on a corner or safety at any point in this game, you haven't been watching the Chiefs enough. They move him around in some of the most creative ways possible to get the matchups that they think are best. We're going to have to step it up on the back end if we want to slow down Mahomes. Everyone talked about how slow of a passing week one it was compared to the past. Mahomes was 9 yards away from 300 against the Ravens defense, who's supposedly one of the best in the league. I don't think this Chiefs offense is slowing down at all. If we're going to get them on a B+, A-, A day, we better be A double plus. And anything lower than a B for them, maybe we can get out of it. But I don't think the Chiefs are slowing down. They didn't show me anything on Thursday night that leads me to believe that they're not chasing a three-peat. And I think the Bengals are going to have their hands full on Sunday with a lot of those things.
Well, look, not only are the DBs going to have to be on point with their coverage, but they're also going to be on point with their tackling. The Chiefs in week one had 188 yards after the catch, 9.4 yards per catch. That's an insane number, and it comes down to one, they get their receivers open through creative route running and crossing routes that obviously lead to pick plays and kind of DBs falling off because of potentially running into other guys. They're going to get creative. They're going to crowd areas, and then they're going to break through, and it's going to lead to open receivers. The DBs have to be on point and have to be prepared for that. The Bengals, just for comparison, the Bengals had only 72 yards after catch, 3.3 per catch in their game in week one. So, I mean, that just shows you a little bit of what these wide receivers can do if you give them even a little bit of space. And so for the Bengals to be out here talking about how all he does is run and run fast, well, I'm here to tell you that, yes, Xavier Worthy didn't put a whole lot on tape in week one. He didn't. I watched every single route he ran. I pulled up on NFL Pro. It gives you the opportunity. I can put in Xavier Worthy on the field and watch every single play. So, yes, he didn't show you a ton. A lot of his routes were rounded off. He wasn't making quick breaks. He wasn't doing a whole lot that made you think that he can do anything other than run fast. I don't buy that that's really his game long term, though. I just don't think so. It may have been that that's just what the game plan was. He was running a lot of short crossing routes, but that's the kind of thing that gets open. The touchdown pass that he had was actually a missed jam, and I know that we're going to look at the clip here in a minute about wanting to be physical, but if you miss that and you don't have help over top, that play can go for long if you want to run that clip.
What does Xavier Worthy bring to this KC offense that you guys need to be prepared for?
Speed. That's about it. He can run straight, run jet sweeps, and just run straight. He can't do too much else, so that's about it. Feel like you put your hands on him. He's only 100-some pounds, so if you put hands on him, you'll stop the speed. So basically, get hands on him.
Just get your hands on him.
Yeah.
Seems simple enough. I'm sure people have tried that, though.
Yeah, just get your hands on him. He's only 107 pounds. It'll be really easy. The problem is if you don't get your hands on him, he's by you in 0.5 seconds, and then you're going to be beat over the top. That touchdown, now I'll say it, and I want to point it out. Kyle Hamilton afterwards took the blame. He said he was supposed to have the deep half of the field. He rolled under, shouldn't have, and that's what led to Xavier Worthy being wide open for that touchdown in the game against Baltimore. Look, Xavier Worthy's going to be quick, but let's not sleep on Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is an extremely good route runner. And then obviously, you know, in week one, he has 7 catches for 103 yards on 9 targets. Like, he's the number one guy in Kansas City right now, bar none.
And 4 catches, 4 for 75 of that came from the slot. He's dominating from a position that he hasn't played a whole lot before. So it might just get even scarier.
Right. So, you know, if we're being honest, the DBs have their work cut out for them, and I appreciate, you know, their willingness to be a little cocky and to have a little arrogance. I do like that. I don't love putting it in the paper, but I do like it, you know. But to Rashee Rice's credit, he comes out and he says, we just let our play do the talking. We're locked in. And so he's ready for it. The Chiefs are ready for it. The Bengals are ready for it. And quite frankly, I'm ready for it. I want to see it too. And I'm a little concerned about a potential boat race. If we're being honest, I'd love to see this game be like 17-13. I just don't know how that'll happen. So let's kind of get into some of those things and talk about this game a little bit more in depth in the preview.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And my main worry for the Chiefs matchup does not come on the offensive side of the ball, and I think it doesn't for most Bengals fans. We know what Patrick Mahomes is going to do. We know what Pacheco and those receivers are going to be able to accomplish with Andy Reid and his brain going on with that offense. But my biggest worry is Chris Jones, and I don't think that's breaking news to anybody. Chris Jones is a game wrecker. He's one of the best in the entire league, and he showed it again over this last week. He had an 82.8 PFF grade with 5 hurries and a sack in week 1. Not a great stat to hear if you remember how we were talking about our offensive line. They move Chris Jones around, much like I was talking about with Travis Kelce. They move him around on offense to search for those matchups. Well, most of the Bengals' offensive line looked pretty good on Sunday. There was one glaring hole that if we see it, I would imagine Steve Spagnuolo sees it. Trent Brown with a 48.8 pass blocking grade, allowed 3 hurries, 4 pressures, and 1 sack on Sunday against the Patriots. Those numbers sound an awful lot like Chris Jones's, and that's not good when you're on the offensive side of the ball. If they're able to match those two up for any kind of duration of the game, I'm incredibly worried for Joe Burrow's comfort in the pocket. We talked about that as being one of the main concerns for us off this past weekend. The relative inability to sense pressure, the lack of confidence in a clean pocket, the not having the willingness to push the ball deep as we've seen him do many, many times before in his career. I think if Chris Jones can wreck this game early for the Chiefs, the Bengals could be in trouble because they could get in their own heads. But if they're able to scheme double teams, move, keep the offense unpredictable to where they can't just continue to have Chris Jones have one-on-one matchups against any of the linemen, really. I'm picking on Trent Brown right now, but there's not really a lineman in the league I feel confident in a one-on-one matchup with Chris Jones in a pass rush. So the Bengals are going to need to be creative. You're going to need to use Zach Moss, not as just a runner to establish the run game and free up a play-action pass or anything longer developing like that. You're going to have to use Zach Moss as a blocker. He's a great pass pro running back. We didn't see a whole lot of it on Sunday, but that's a part of his game that the Bengals signed him to do here. And it's going to come into play big time against the Chiefs this weekend. They're going to need all hands on deck to protect Joe Burrow, have some of those downfield passing game plays develop. They take time, and Chris Jones on the opposing defensive line does not give you a whole lot of time. So they're going to have to find a way to scheme around him.
Well, and the problem, obviously, is that you can't just abandon the edge rusher and double Chris Jones, because George Karlaftis was top 5 in the league in pressures in week 1. He had 6 pressures in week 1. So if you try and double Chris Jones, you're leaving George Karlaftis one-on-one with potentially a tight end, and that's not an ideal scenario for anybody either. We saw the Bengals, and again, watching film, I saw the Bengals on multiple occasions try to chip block a guy to get them into a position so that they could be one-on-one. And quite frankly, it just wasn't good enough on their chip blocking. So what I want to see is, can the Bengals tight ends and backs chip block solid enough to really set up the offensive line to be successful against those top 2 pass rushers in the league, Chris Jones and George Karlaftis? I think that's a really big matchup for them. But I also think that, again, those guys are bringing the pressure a lot. So if you can run into that a little bit, run past the guys as they're trying to drive towards the quarterback, that opens up the field a little bit more and gives you an opportunity potentially to run that direction. And again, in week 1, the Bengals ran right 8 times out of 9 rushes. So, I mean, that's certainly something that you could see line up with the Kansas City Chiefs as well, where, okay, we know that these guys are top-notch pass rushers, but we're going to try to play into that. We're going to do some screens off to the right. We're going to try and pound the ball to that direction and see if we can't get them missing by rushing the quarterback too much. I think there's a lot of opportunity to try and attack that, but only if you're willing to. And certainly running the ball 9 times isn't going to slow down that Kansas City pass rush at all.
Yeah, that's focusing on the defensive side of the ball for Kansas City, which is obviously going to pose a lot of problems for the Bengals, and you need to score points to win. So that's the point I'm focusing on right now, because that's what the Bengals struggled with most last weekend. But offensively for the Bengals, the last thing on that side is I'm really excited for Joe Burrow. You talked about it earlier in the show. You said that he dominates man-to-man coverage, and that's absolutely true. Since 2022, he's first in the NFL in passer rating against man coverage. There's no one that does it better than Joe Burrow. And the Chiefs play the second most man coverage in the entire league. It's a match made in heaven. They're without L'Jarius Sneed, obviously, in Tennessee now, that lockdown number one corner. We've already given Trent McDuffie his due, but there's a lot of new pieces in that secondary that are going to have to learn to work together. And I respect the Ravens. They're a dominant team. They're a Super Bowl contender. They're right here neck and neck with the Bengals in the AFC North. No one's saying anything different, but they beat you in a very, very different way than the Bengals do. They beat you with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, up the gut, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, big bodies across the middle. The Bengals have speed on the outside that very, very few teams have. I think this new secondary for the Chiefs, a ton of credit to Steve Spagnuolo. If anyone can get them ready for it, he can. But I think this is going to be a massive test for a lot of new pieces in the secondary. And we're giving them a lot of credit for how they played against the Ravens, rightfully so, but this is a completely different look for this Bengals offense. The talent and the speed is nowhere near what the Ravens have. I mean, obviously Zay Flowers is great, but Zay Flowers, not a great downfield threat in that game. A lot of dink and dunk underneath passes to him, screens and flats and things of that nature. If the Bengals attack the Chiefs deep, we could find a hole that we don't even know exists yet, just because we haven't seen these guys be tested in this system yet this year.
Yeah, Jalen Watson, who's replacing L'Jarius Sneed as the cornerback, opposite, obviously, of Trent McDuffie. He led Kansas City with 11 tackles last week. You don't see a cornerback leading the team in tackles a whole lot. Now, the stats will tell you that he only gave up 4 catches on 6 targets for 35 yards. But the fact that he had 11 tackles tells me that he's certainly giving up a little bit more than that, even if he's not the primary coverage man. And so I'd love to see the Bengals find a way to try and attack that. I do believe that Kansas City has a little bit of a deficiency there compared to last year. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not a good corner and that he's not great. And let's not forget, Justin Reed is the strong safety, is a really, really good safety as well. So there's going to have to be some toying a little bit. But I think, again, it starts with making them respect the run game in Zach Moss, and that's what I'm focused on. Zach Moss last week, 5 yards per carry, 4.5, whatever it was, had a decent week and gave us what we expected out of him, but now it's time to take it to that next step. Can we get him going? Can we bring in Chase Brown for a change of pace to try and get the running back game in the screen game opened up? Can we get this defense to start respecting the run game so that they can target over the top and try and attack this Chiefs secondary? That'll be the question for me offensively. Now, defensively, here's the key for me. It's Sam Hubbard. Last week, obviously, we talked a lot about Trey Hendrickson's success passing the rusher, but Sam Hubbard did absolutely nothing to support that. The Bengals finished with the second best pressure rate in the league on Sunday, but ended up with only 1 sack despite all of that. Trey Hendrickson led the way, obviously. Logan Wilson had a couple where he came unblocked, but Sam Hubbard with a 0% pass win rate is completely unacceptable. Yeah. And he's going to be going up against Kingsley Suamataia, who did not grade out very well in week 1, 48.9 in week 1 overall as an offensive lineman. And so that's a matchup for me defensively I'm looking at, because if we can, one, put pressure on Patrick Mahomes, make him leave the pocket. He's one of the best in the league at scrambling. We know that. But if you have more than one guy getting home, it makes it a lot easier to try and finish those out, get the sack, compared to Patrick Mahomes being able to run wild. And for me, the key to that comes down to Sam Hubbard.
Focusing on Kingsley Suamataia is quite funny. Obviously, he's a big issue with that O-line, but if we're focusing on him, that means we're not talking about Jawan Taylor, who is not very good either. So this is a guy that was pretty much the talk of the town after that Thursday night game. The refs kept flagging the Ravens for illegal formations and the tackles moving early, and Jawaan Taylor seemingly doing the same thing on the Chiefs side of the ball. Obviously, if you watch any Chiefs film, that's going to be something that jumps out to you right away, is he's seemingly timing it up perfectly, inexplicably, every single snap. And with that illegal formation, slight movement for the tackles not being lined up across the belt line of the lineman next to you, with that being a point of emphasis for the NFL officiating and refs in basically every game so far this year, I'm hoping that they finally call it on him in this game. I don't know. I've been watching the Chiefs play for a while now, and the refs seemingly never go against them. I don't want to be that guy, but they did get 5 downs against the Bengals not too long ago. But I'm hoping that either gets fixed and he's not jumping quite as quickly, or they start getting called, because Jawaan Taylor seems to be enemy number one for something that they're putting a point of emphasis on this year, and somehow it hasn't come back to bite him yet. But outside of the 2 tackles, their interior is pretty stout, and that starts and ends with Creed Humphrey. He's the best center in football. He was there on the draft board when the Bengals drafted Jackson Carman, who was so unceremoniously cut this offseason. He was just extended with the most expensive center deal of all time in Kansas City, and he's the stalwart in the front of that defense. Obviously, Mahomes, great. His brain is incredible. We saw the Eagles play in week 1 and how much the loss of Jason Kelce to retirement meant to that offense, meant to Jalen Hurts. Creed Humphrey is a huge piece of this Chiefs offense, and I feel like with the big names they have elsewhere, he never gets enough credit. So while we're spending some time on the Chiefs, wanted to give a moment to say that I'm worried about the center too. That guy in the middle is pretty dang good.
He's very good. He is very good.
The Chiefs worked in a second running back, which was something I didn't really expect over the weekend. Isaiah Pacheco, 15 carries, noticeably the lead down in that offense. But Carson Steele, a rookie, was worked in with just 2 carries, but a lot of snaps in pass pro or anything like that. I wonder if they're trying to find another late round find to pair with Pacheco, have a nice, give or take there in the backfield, because that's the one thing I always say when going about Isaiah Pacheco, the 7th round pick, like we said, who's emerged as a consistent piece in that offense. How consistent can he be? He's a 7th round pick for a reason. These guys don't last forever. When's the last time, at least I can't think of one, a 7th round pick that has made it, multiple years contributing to a championship level team as a big time name? The list is not very long if a list does exist. So Isaiah Pacheco doing this for just 2 years is very impressive. I'm keeping an eye on the rest of that Chiefs backfield to see if anyone else emerges, just because this would be such an outlier for Pacheco to carve out a long-term career as a feature back.
Yeah, look, Pacheco has certainly done his job. The Chiefs also went out and signed Samaje Perine this offseason after the Denver Broncos let him walk. So, they could be, you mentioned specifically talking about the passing game out of the backfield. I mean, Samaje Perine can serve a little bit as a mentor per se to that. Isaiah Pacheco, 2 catches for 33 yards out of the backfield, though. Samaje Perine, 1 for 10. Carson Steele didn't record a catch. He only had 2 carries for 3 yards, long of 5 yards, and the other one was a negative gain. Look, I don't know. I honestly wouldn't spend too much time thinking about anyone outside of Pacheco in the running game. I expect them to get the ball in Xavier Worthy's hands. I'm sure Mahomes will scramble some. But at the end of the day, I think realistically worrying about anybody other than number 10 from the backfield is a waste of time at this point. I do want to mention one other Chief before we get into talking about Thursday night's football game. Tershawn Wharton stepped in replace of Derek Nottie at defensive tackle for the Chiefs. He recorded 4 pressures on Lamar Jackson in week 1. So the middle of our, along with Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, you're going to have yet another potential big man to have to worry about in Tershawn Wharton.
That's right. They seem to always have depth and always have answers whenever they have someone come out. And I guess that's why they've won 2 Super Bowls in a row, right, Craig? Obviously a big-time game between possibly the NFL's biggest rivals right now. Outside of divisional rivals, which always take the cake for me personally, I think if you ask any general NFL fan, Bengals-Chiefs is up there towards the top of the list for biggest rivalry in the NFL right now, and we get to see a new version of it on Sunday. I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen both these teams at full strength together, and obviously the Bengals again, without T. Higgins on Sunday, still going to be a little bit away from that full strength. But as we're here on Thursday night, right before the game kicks off here in about 15, 20 minutes, Craig, I thought it would be nice to give all the loyal watchers of the program some winners. And this obviously isn't gambling advice, but this is what we're going to take tonight, and we're trying to help you out. If you have yours ready, I'll let you go ahead and start us off, Craig.
Yeah, well, let's start with the outcome of the game. I'm taking Bills money line here, not even Bills plus 2.5. The fact that they're laying 2.5 is kind of crazy to me. Bills 11-1 in their last 12 with Miami. Josh Allen 6-0 on Thursday night. Coming into Miami, I get it. It's a road game, but it's a Thursday night. I like the Bills certainly to cover. I would even go as far as saying Bills money line. The other one is kind of crazy to me. Devon Achane being 48.5 rushing yards is the line. I'm taking the over all day on that. No Raheem Mostert. He's going to get a majority of the carries over Jeff Wilson and Jalen Wright. So I'm going to go pretty heavy on the Achane over 48.5. And then if I have to be pushed to a third, I'm going to take the under 48.5. The Bills rushed the ball 33 times in week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals. Now that game's still obviously high scoring in the end, but expect the Bills to try and manage the clock a little bit more in this one going up against a high-powered Dolphins offense. I'm going to take the under, primetime unders, smack.
I like all of those, and I'm already on 2 of them. I'm going to run and take Achane as soon as we're off of here. But I have 3 more for you guys, and I feel really good about all of them. No Mostert, as Craig said. Achane limited in practice all week. He will go today, but who knows how much. And last week anyway, he had 7 catches, tied for second most on the team. So without Mostert, I think the Dolphins are going to be focusing on throwing the ball. And Tua's passing prop is at 268.5. That line is unbelievably low, in my opinion, over 300 yards last week. The Bills' secondary, glad he's still with us, but DeMar Hamlin's starting at safety. I don't know how good your secondary is. So I'm taking Tua over 268.5 passing yards. Last week was Josh Allen's 3rd fewest completions of his career, and Keon Coleman had 51 yards on 4 receptions. This week, Keon Coleman's line is 44.5 receiving yards. If I add that math up in my head, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think he's going to go way over that. I think the Bills are going to throw the ball a lot more tonight, and I think Keon's going to go over. And then I drafted Dalton Kincaid in every fantasy league I'm in because I thought he was going to have a great year, and then he gets shut down in week 1. So what am I doing? Learning from my mistakes, getting smarter, moving on? Absolutely not. Dalton Kincaid anytime touchdown is my biggest bet of the night.
I love it. Biggest bet of the night.
Biggest bet of the
night. That's a choice for sure.
I'm rocking with my guys. I'm rocking with my guys.
I appreciate that for sure. The other one I had on my list that I decided not to go with. I'm trying to find the odds real quick on it if I still have it. But Josh Allen 2+ passing touchdowns for me. Despite the fact that I just told you they're going to run the ball and and all of that, he finds a way in short yardage to get the ball into the end zone. Maybe one of those goes Dalton Kincaid's way, and
I'm good.
And we can both be happy with it.
That works for me, Craig. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being in the chat. Chatterbox Bengals will be back with you at kickoff of the game on Sunday when the Bengals take on the Chiefs in week 2. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll get you off just in time to catch kickoff of the game. We'll see you guys on Sunday. Craig, before we do this again, and I have to take it off and bring you back on, anything else to add before I send us off?
No, nothing else to add today. Don't forget
to be safe.
Sunday games at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Jacob will be live all game long to give you immediate reaction and interact with the chat. I'll be joining post game for live reaction and breaking down some of the key plays of the game in what we can obviously hope is a Bengals win. With that said, real quick, we didn't even touch on it. You have it on the J bar. Bengals plus 5.5, and the over-under is set at 47.5. Early picks there. What are you thinking?
I'm taking the Bengals. there's no way I can. After starting like that, you need to turn around to get me all the way back in on this team and what I want to do at the end of this year, which is celebrate a Super Bowl at the Banks. So I'm taking plus 5.5 because I think the Bengals turn it around this week, and I don't think the Bengals are going to win if that total goes over. So I'm going to take the under as well.
Man, you're taking the under 47.5. Bengals plus 5.5. I tell you what, if it is Bengals plus 5.5, it's because it has to be under 47.5. My heart wants to go with you and wants to say Bengals plus 5.5 and the under. I'm not going to do it. I think the Chiefs win this one. I think it's close. I think they probably get something late to win by somewhere in the 6 to 8 range. And I think this probably barely goes over the 47.5. Maybe something like a 20 to 26 win. Oh, no, that wouldn't put it over. Maybe like a 23 to 29 win or something, 29 to 30. Whatever. Forget it.
It's all the same.
Give me the over.
All right, so opposite sides. This postgame show on Sunday will be awfully fun. I'll either be celebrating a pick'em win and a Bengals win over Craig, or he'll be right and sad. So at least I get to be right and
so
happy.
What you're telling me is either way I'm going to be sad. Okay,
That's
perfect.
right.
Great.
That's right. Well, guys, we'll send you off just in time to catch kickoff. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today for this episode of Chatterbox Bengals. Jacob Tissett, Craig Sandlin. We'll catch you at kickoff on Sunday.